Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Pittman. I'm Chancellor of St. Louis Community College. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome you here today. And on behalf of all the faculty and staff and our trustees, we always look forward to this event every year. And I just want to thank all of the workers, the staff, the faculty that helped put this thing together. And quickly, could we give them a round of applause before we go much further so I don't forget? Thanks, Christine. We thank you for being here. This is our 18th State of the St. Louis Workforce event. 18, I can't get over that. And I've been here for 12 of them, and I feel really, really good about that. But we're not doing anything without support of our Board of Trustees. And we have two trustees here that I'd like to introduce. First is our board chair, Dr. Craig Larson. Craig, could you please stand and be recognized? And then our vice chair, Holly Tallier. Holly, could you stand and be recognized? Well, we want to thank all of you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. We've got a very interesting program today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all the panelists as we get started on that part of it. But first, I want to recognize some longstanding partners of the college in making this event possible. First is MERIC. It's the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center that's out of Jefferson City that has helped us with all this data collection and the work that we have done as well. And then certainly our great friends at the St. Louis Business Journal. And since I've been here, at least for the 12 years I've been, they've been here, been our media partner. They've done a terrific job in getting this event out, making you all aware of it, and sharing this important data that we need. And many of you in this room may understand some of the demographic shifting and challenges that the St. Louis region has right now. There's a lot of movement with demographics. We're not alone in this, but I know we St. Louisans are going to figure this out. We're going to figure this out, and I think it all starts with the type of work that all of you're doing, using this data any way we can to leverage all the opportunities we have here in St. Louis. With that, I'd like to introduce from the St. Louis Business Journal, the publisher, Robert Bobrow.
Thank you, Dr. Pittman. Good morning, everyone. St. Louis Business Journal is proud to once again partner with St. Louis Community College for this annual State of the St. Louis Workforce event. It's an important conversation for our region, and we are honored to be a part of it again. This has become one of my favorite events each year because workforce isn't just another business topic. It is the foundation of every successful business. Nearly every executive we speak with is thinking about how to attract, develop, and retain great talent. Earlier this year, we were proud to partner with St. Louis Community College to once again produce our annual Workforce Development Guide. In fact, the college has been a founding sponsor of the guide since we launched it 4 years ago, demonstrating their long-term commitment to advancing workforce development throughout our region. That partnership has had an impact well beyond St. Louis. What began here has become a model for other business journals across the country, with a number of other markets now producing their very own workforce development guide. I think that's something our region, and especially St. Louis Community College, should be proud of. Dr. Pittman, thank you for your leadership and for continuing to bring the business, education, and civic communities together around such an important issue. We appreciate the opportunity to be a partner of yours once again, and I'll turn things back over to you to start today's program. Thank you.
All right, so kicking things off, I want to introduce our new Vice Chancellor of Employer and Workforce Solutions here at St. Louis Community College. Dr. Rob Lee, he started out as a historian and was a history professor here at Merrimack. Don't hold that against him. He really knows a lot about workforce. And then he was in charge of our South County site down in South County around Merrimack Bottom Road. And now he's moved up into this very significant role for the college and for the community. So Rob, we really appreciate you. We're going to look forward to your leadership in this role for many years. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rob Lee.
I'm glad he mentioned I was a historian by training. Hopefully lets me get in a few comments along the way here. Let's get rid of that slide. There we go. The report demonstrates something very clearly, and the report is available to all of you. There's a QR code on your brochure that you can download. It demonstrates that the region is at an inflection point. Now, as a historian, I'm going to tell you that 9 times out of 10, I say inflection point and you hear crisis. Sure, but it's also a moment of opportunity. It all depends on how we take it on. And that is why St. Louis Community College made the decision to change the name from Workforce Solutions Group to Employer and Workforce Solutions. We want to make sure that we are there for everybody in the St. Louis area, the employer and the person in the workforce who's seeking to advance their own career. This was a decision that we made as a result of the report, seeing the data in the report and choosing not just to respond to what's in there, but to respond in a way that provides to all of you and to everybody not in this room, all the employers who couldn't be with us today, an opportunity to partner with us. Or if you are somebody in the workforce looking to advance your own career, to partner with us, to come to St. Louis Community College and find those skills that you need. Now, I'm only going to hit on a few points from the report. It's a rather large report. We survey over 1,000 businesses. It takes us the better part of a year to put it together. And there is a lot in there. So I urge you to use the QR code and take a look at the full report and take some time to really live with it, because there is a lot of information there that will not only explain to you the inflection point that we are at in many ways, but many of the opportunities that we have going forward. The title of the report is The Changing Nature of Work. Coming out of COVID, the changing nature of work meant, do I have to go to the office? Can I be hybrid? Can I be at home? That's not what it means anymore. The business community is experiencing something that the college community has actually been living with for quite some time, and that is a multi-generational audience. You walk into any college classroom and you will find the 16, 17-year-old high school student who's here on dual enrollment, all the way up to the 55, 60-year-old person who's coming back either just for their own personal enrichment or because they've retired from their first career and they're preparing for Act Two, and everybody in between. And that is what we are finding in the workplace today. For the vast majority of you, when you walk into your offices, there is somebody from the baby boom generation all the way to the millennials and Z, and of course, holding the whole thing together, Generation X, right here. I'm not kidding. This is a great graph that provides us a lot of false hope. You look at this graph right here, the median age of the workforce in St. Louis, and you think, okay, there's some deviations in there, but we're holding it together. This is the inflection point. There's a sociologist at St. Louis University by the name of Ness Sandoval, and if you do not subscribe to his essays, you should. He runs an outstanding online journal called Demography for Democracy. I will warn you, you will not necessarily feel good about the world after you read it, but it'll give you a lot to think about and a lot of information about which way to go. Ness would look at this graph and tell you that we are actually tipped into demographic winter, which is a fantastically Hollywood-sounding name. But it actually has some very important undertones to it. Demographic winter is very simple. It is when the death rate of a community is outpacing the birth rate, and not by a margin that can be made up anytime soon. 14 of the 15 counties in the St. Louis metro area are in demographic winter. The 15th is not St. Louis County. It's not St. Charles County. Those are the first two everybody thought of. It's not Jefferson County. It was Lincoln County. And they're tipping over as well. They just got lucky about when the survey was taken. So the death rate in St. Louis is outpacing the birth rate by a significant margin. So even if we had a baby boom today, we're 18 plus years away from solving it that way. So we're going to have to do it other ways. And this is putting a lot of stress on the workforce. As a result, in the survey, you told us, even if you didn't know about demographic winter, you told us how it's hurting you. You are being forced to hire workers that do not have the skills. There is a shortage of workers out there with the skills that you need in your workforce. Now, we can certainly help with that. But it's not as simple as just saying, send us your workers. It's also in how we respond as a region, because there is no one industry that has escaped this. Every industry in the St. Louis area is facing this in some way. So what we are actually looking at is something that requires a regional effort, a regional response. No one business community, and not even the mighty STLCC can reverse this all by ourselves. It is an all of St. Louis effort. How have you been responding to the shortage of available workers? You've been hiring those with less experience. That's logical. But you've also been going outside the local city. And this, Ness Sandoval points out, is what communities, including Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, Kansas City, are all having to do, because they're all facing, to greater or lesser degrees, the same problem. Now, the bad news is that St. Louis is leading the charge in a demographic winter. We're usually a couple years behind on major trends. We are way out in front on this one. And so we have to recruit from other cities. We have to go to Kansas City and Cleveland and Columbus, everywhere. Little Rock, Iowa City, all of them are on the board to recruit workers. And when workers want to come here, they're not just going to want to come here by and large for a paycheck. They're not just going to want to come here for a job. We know from the data that they're looking for opportunities. Where can I grow my skill set? Where can I move up? What amenities are in the city? And we have all of those things. We just have to sell them. And that includes partnering with you and you partnering with us to sell the potential here at STLCC. Now, another bit that's in the report that's going to provide a bit of a hiccup in doing this, because we can offer the training to get your less experienced workers, your new hires, up to speed. We can offer the training that it helps you attract the out-of-town person. But here's the catch. 76% of the companies in the survey report they're going to spend $500 or less per employee in a year on professional development. That's just not going to fly. Now, for some of you, that's not a choice. It's a budgetary reality. But we have a solution for you. There is a new program coming through called Workforce Pell. Many of you have heard of Pell Grants on the academic side of the house. This is a workforce-centered Pell program. It provides short-term training into a stackable credential, meaning you send your employees here for short-term training in one of the Workforce Pell programs, and we will be adding to them over the years. This will be a constantly evolving thing. And I will note, if there's an area that you see that we should be offering, I want to hear from you. I need to hear from you what areas we have not already developed something for, and then we will figure out how to do it, because we want to partner with you. But back to Workforce Pell, you come for the short-term training. It then feeds into an academic program, an associate's degree. So your employee can come to us for short-term training, get their skill set up, paid for through the Pell program, and then they can come back full-time, part-time on the standard Pell program student loans, your assistance, however it works out, and continue their education. There are solutions out there for those that can't get above the $500. There are solutions. You can just reach out to us, and we will help figure that out. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to have two panels. They're all centered on the multi-generational workforce. What's it like to be there? The first panel will be from the employer's perspective, people working with the employees. What's it like to be managing all of these people from all of these different perspectives with all of these different expectations that come into the workforce? The second panel will be from the employee's perspective. What's it like to be in there? That top line up there jumped out in the report. 70 to 71% said that poor work ethics, poor work habits are a problem that employers see of their employees. What does that mean? And this strikes at the heart of the generational issue. Are you defining that as they're not at their desk from 9 to 5? Are you defining that as they're not in the office 5 days a week? Or how are you defining it? Because the generations see all of this differently. Some of them are very project focused. I got all my work done on time. I just did it in less time. Some demand or expect that hybrid balance. Work from home some days, work in the office other days. But for some employers, regardless of generation, but especially for those of us Generation X and into the boomers, for some of us, not being at the office 5 days a week is weird. We can get used to it, but not, I can, but it's weird. So how does that translate into how we look at things? And that is among the things we hope you think about as you're listening to the panels today. I am now going to hand it off to Dr. Pittman and ask his panelists to please join us up here on the stage as we move into the multi-generational workforce from the employer's perspective. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll try this. Handheld mic. Might be a little easier for me to serve as moderator here. Well, again, thank you for being here. I want to welcome our panelists for taking the time to be here today. I'll do introductions right now. And Sharon, do you want to start?
Sure. Sharon Barnes. I am representing Craftsman Industries and really excited to be here. Is there anything else in particular that you'd like me to share?
Well, we'll get to some questions here in a few minutes. But
Okay.
that's enough
Perfect.
information for now. Barry.
Yes, my name is Barry Engelhardt. I am the HR director for Murphy Company and also the president of the Society of Human Resources Management St. Louis chapter.
Okay, great, thank you. Tom.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tom Evers, or now I'm the district engineer, even though on the program it says assistant district engineer. I recently got promoted, so. But I work for the Missouri Department of Transportation and just happy to be here representing the transportation industry.
Okay, thank you. Tim.
Tim Lukey, I'm the director of the St. Louis CAPS program. We partner with 5 local public school districts, Afton, Bayless, Lindbergh, Kirkwood, and Melville school districts, to provide primarily high school seniors the opportunity to engage in profession-based learning.
Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate you all making those introductions, and our focus areas today will be on recruiting across generations, retention and engagement strategies in the workplace, workplace flexibility and culture, leadership development, upskilling and career growth, and future workforce challenges. And Sharon, right back to you. We'll start with you.
Alrighty.
The first question. Craftsman's Industries operate in manufacturing, which often combines long-tenured employees with newer workers entering technical and skilled trade careers. What have you found to be the most effective ways to encourage knowledge sharing between experienced employees and younger team members?
Sure. Yeah, first I want to say thank you to St. Louis Community College. This is a really exciting topic and one that, we can all definitely resonate with. So what I would say is important is the key factor of knowledge sharing. I think making sure that there's a safe space where employees feel comfortable and able to share. When you have higher tenured employees and then you have, I'll use the term seasoned employees, and then you have less tenured employees working within the same work group, you have to find that balance. And so making sure there's a space that you include knowledge sharing so that, there is representation from both sides. We have employees that are 30 plus years, and we have others that are just joining the organization. And some of those 30 plus tenured employees, obviously much more seniored. And so they can help bridge the gap and shed light on kind of those experience situations that some that are newer tenured or less experienced without having to go through that, and find those bumps in the road on their own.
Great. So the more tenured employees really help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the younger ones coming in. Terrific. And I also want to say that if any of you would like to also respond to their questions as they come up, please do so. Let's make this an active and engaging conversation as we go along. So please chime in. Barry. So the Society for Human Resource Management research frequently highlights changing employee expectations around flexibility, purpose, and career growth. What trends are you seeing among different generations, and how are employers adapting to meet those expectations while still achieving business goals?
All right. I definitely do find a lot of value in different generations, but sometimes I wonder if another underestimated factor is truly basic economics. What I mean by that is market conditions. When I was younger, there's a lot of things that I wanted: autonomy, mastery, all those things that employees are looking for in a culture. But I also needed a job, and jobs were harder to come by at that point. It was very much an employer-centric market. As Generation X, several decades ago, didn't reproduce at quite the same rates as generations before it, as the baby boomers continue to retire, it seems that the pendulum's shifted pretty significantly. What I find is the organizations that succeed are responding intentionally and thoughtfully in connection to their strategy, as opposed to just reacting to these shifting labor conditions. So to me, the proper way to go about this is to find that balance between meeting the employees where they are, what they're looking for, shifting to that market, while also holding the employees accountable to producing your strategy and your results.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, over to you. So you've got a few projects going on in the state right now, don't you?
A couple, yeah.
Anybody that's driven on Highway 70 knows what I'm talking about. So transportation relies heavily on experienced employees while also bringing in new talent with different perspectives and skills. As experienced employees retire and new workers enter the field, how do you preserve institutional knowledge while creating opportunities for the next generation to continue to lead?
So we have a very unique, we have a unique workforce, because I'll say out of our 700 employees that we have that work in the St. Louis region, 5,000 employees statewide, well over half of them are very safety sensitive employees and work on the highways alongside 70 mile per hour plus traffic on our highways. And safety is number one. So whenever employees walk in the door, not only do we work diligently onboarding them and giving them all the safety tools, we also go through rigorous safety on the job training when our employees begin. And we also we need the older employees, the more experienced employees to provide that mentorship and guidance, because you can't make a misstep when you're patching a pothole, repairing any of our roads or bridges in the area. We have to really focus on that. So a lot of training and a lot of reinforcing those safety messages is paramount. And then for our technical staff, I think that's a little bit different, where they're not they're out there maybe behind a desk. They're designing our roads and bridges. They don't have the safety training that they need, but they certainly need the technical skill sets. So we go through, because we're very regimented as a state agency, but we want to make sure our employees are getting the right learning experiences early on in their career. And we do that both through online training, but really the on-the-job and mentorships is really the best practice for our organization.
Okay, very good. Tim, you got a great program.
Thank you.
We've been working with you folks down at our South County campus.
Yeah.
And appreciate the opportunities for the young people down there. So, Tim, you helped build the future workforce pipeline. What are employers doing well today in preparing young people for careers, and where is there still room for improvement?
Well, I think that employers do a fantastic job of utilizing traditional pathways to recruit talent to their organizations, and that would be through summer internships for college students. And that works well, and that's an established approach. But students today are exposed to so many opportunities earlier, and they are discovering what their talents are and where their talents lie, and they're looking for opportunities before college. They're looking for opportunities to confirm what their interests are. College is incredibly expensive, and being able to zero in and have a grounded understanding of, yes, this is a career path, a college-bound career path that I'm interested in, and that helps better select the right university, the types of programs for them to go and visit, but ultimately the area where we need to expand that is through partnerships with high school programs. There's a tremendous amount of students that are looking at colleges and universities, and many of those colleges and universities are not in the St. Louis area. So providing students with access and opportunity to those experiences with businesses, to where they gain a true understanding about that, what does that business do? What is their culture? What opportunities exist there? Is this a good fit for me? In looking at those pathways, it provides them with an opportunity to convince them, even if they do go outside of St. Louis for school, to come back and be in a summer intern program. Or in many cases, we have business partners that once they're finished with our program in May, they're providing them an opportunity to have a paid internship before they even get into high school. So increasing access, kind of, again, we're talking about generations here, so a Wizard of Oz effect, if you will, of letting those high school students peek behind the curtain and get a better understanding of what all of these businesses that have their names on buildings around the St. Louis area, understand what they do, understand if it aligns, to what they're passionate about, and then create ways to engage those students in those opportunities with their businesses to kind of get a feel for them as well. So those are definitely some things that are going on that are really good in areas of growth.
All right, yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. I will say, I've been around a long time, obviously, but I have never seen the opportunities available before to young people coming out of high school that there are now. Those direct linkages to employers are so critical. So it certainly has changed the way we do business at St. Louis Community College, how we're working to align programming with employers, creating internship opportunities or paid apprenticeship opportunities, much like what CAPS is doing. I think we all have to pull together on that. And it's just, I think way back in the day when I went to high school, there weren't these opportunities. We really didn't even talk about careers. I think that's changing. As Dr. Lee talked about the demographic winter, I think we have to adapt. The educational systems have to adapt for that. Okay, well, let me throw out a general question to all of you before I go back to the individual questions. And Tim, this made me think of this. So it's hard to imagine our workforce today, you have employees from probably 4 or 5 generations. 5 generations, Sharon? Wow. What's the biggest benefit of having an age-diverse workforce? And what's the biggest challenge that employers must address to make it successful? Any of you want to have any comments for that question?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth is, and this is just based on conversations, that the generations are so far different. Now, I recognize there is a difference, otherwise we wouldn't be having this topic, but there is a level of commonality between the generations. And so I'll say we have a very seniored person, a member of our leadership team, and they are responsible for Gen Z millennials. So we're talking about 1 to 3 generations removed between the two leaders that we have. And they've done a phenomenal job at bridging that gap. And it just hones in on the understanding. I think, if you allow that communication approach where there's an understanding, again, going back to the safe place approach of being able to have the conversations, but then not starting out with, okay, how are we so different because we come from different generations? Within the company, we're all moving towards the same goal. So how do we get there cohesively? So I think the myth from the conversations I've had is that we're so far different because of the generations. But if you really stop and think about, the mission at hand and how we can work together, that's key. And the term demographic winter, we talked about this earlier. I was introduced to that term about a year ago. And I mean, it's breathtaking when you think about everything that's to come around the demographic winter. And I appreciate groups, such as St. Louis Community College and others, and I'm sure representatives in this room that are focusing on initiatives that, help from that workforce and employer standpoint. Because right now, what we focus on within our organization, and I'm not saying we're perfect by far, but retention is the #1 recruitment tool. It has to be. And Dr. Lee's presentation really honed in with the data that we saw this morning, what that truly means for us.
Well, I think about all the different generations. I would hope that the older generations see themselves there as the benefit for the younger ones too.
Absolutely.
In the employee, in the employer world, that they can help them develop and do better at their work and be able to be prepared for the future. Any other comments to that question?
I think it works both ways. I mean, I've been a mentor and I've been a mentee, and I can say I learned as much about myself, if not more, being a mentor. Just thoughtful questions, challenges. I mean, it's easy to get into a routine. It's easy to not stop and think about why and how you do the things you do, and then suddenly it's put in front of you and through a new perspective, and that outsider perspective or that new perspective can be really powerful. So I think the best mentor-mentee or experienced and incoming relationships aren't one side passing down to the other. It's both working in tandem, both growing together, creating balance and perspective that just wouldn't be had otherwise.
We actually see, so we have employees who retire from MoDOT, and we bring them back as part-time employees, and oftentimes we bring them back to be mentors and teachers, and although similar to maybe my generation and above, we all like to print out everything, and our technology acumen is not the same as maybe the younger generation, but in terms of just talking to a younger employee is not that, I mean, I think there's a lot of commonality, like you said, like this, that's not all that different. The differences come that I see is the younger generation wants the newer technology. They want to use, we're starting to use drones, we're starting to use GIS mapping more, and that invigorates the younger generation, whereas the older employees don't really care about that. They'll map it out as they used to on pencil and paper, and they'd rather do it like that.
I'll tell it myself, so I always have the urge to print something out and grab a highlighter.
That's okay.
All the time. I do that all the time. Right?
I think that speaking from the perspective, I'm primarily working with students, our business partners. I think it's, for our students, they just want to be valued. They want to be seen by those older generations as being valuable, and they want to learn from them, and they want to know what they know. And I think it's breaking down the stereotypes of what a high school student is going to look like when they walk through the door of a hoodie and AirPods and very disengaged or whatever it might be. Like, that couldn't be further from the truth for the majority of high school students. They have strong feelings about career opportunities. We do a lot of work within the program to empower them, Clifton Strength Finders and other pathways, so that when they walk through that door, they're not presenting themselves as a high school student, they're presenting themselves as an aspiring professional. They want to be there, and they want that opportunity. And I think once, veteran employees, it doesn't matter what generation, they see that hunger and that desire and that interest and that passion, they're all in. And it very quickly just becomes about what value can you bring to our team, and then what value can we provide you in what you're really hoping to get out of this opportunity and this career path. So I just think, for me, it's about that, capturing that value and really empowering those students and whether they be high school or college, and giving them that opportunity. I think it very quickly eliminates a lot of those concerns.
Well, quick commercial here. So the college is engaged in a new initiative called the Workforce Learning Connection, where we're beginning at the 7th and 8th grade level, or the junior high or middle school level, to help introduce young people to careers. We're basically serving as the interface between K through 12 and employers, and are always looking for additional employers, if you're interested, to be a part of this work, to give students those early experiences while they're in K through 12, to help them understand about all the great careers there are right here in St. Louis. Because our primary goal should be to get young people ready for careers and keep them here.
100%.
Keep them in St. Louis. Given the demographics, we can't afford to lose people to other regions, certainly.
Right.
So, okay, done with that commercial. Sharon, back to you.
We're done.
So many organizations struggle with differing expectations around communication, feedback, and career advancement. What are some practical steps HR leaders can take to create a workplace culture where employees of all generations feel valued and engaged?
That's a great question. So there's really no one size fits all when you're, working with many generations. As I mentioned, we have 5 in the workplace. Sure I get over enough. So that's exciting in of itself, but it goes back to what's important to each, not just generation, but each person. So we have touch point meetings with newer team members, and then we also have touch point meetings with our tenured team members, and so that's 10 years and up. Our highest tenured team member is 36 years of service, which is really exciting. And so it goes back to, to Barry's point, how they're overlapping and sharing examples, sharing experiences. We do a lot with micro learning, for those that love the technological piece, but it's really honing in on what's important for each person, and that's where your frontline leadership is really important. And so our focus is really preparing our leaders, and that's what we're driving right now, because if they're leading that team in the manner that is supportive to each of those team members, you'll be a lot more productive, and you're able to accomplish a lot more. So when I joined Craftsman Industries 5 years ago, we had about 140 team members at that time. We grew relatively quickly over the next few years, and now we're over 230 and counting, so we'll continue to grow. What I noticed at that, at the earlier stages, we had employees that were 20 plus years, 30 years, and they struggled with the growth and bringing in so many new faces, and this isn't the company that I'm accustomed to, and this is challenging for me. And at that time, we didn't realize the impact that it was having on, our senior generation, bringing in a lot of, lesser experienced team members. And so now we understand, to your point, having apprenticeship programs, interns, that's, a heavy push for us because that's the reality of the workforce. And so we love to partner in ways where we can bring in those interns and apprentices, hope they come back, and we have returning interns, and if they don't, we hope that we've invested enough that they can take that experience elsewhere. But really it comes back to, again, the commonality, and then what is valuable to each person that you're interacting with.
Well, I really appreciate, that's great leadership. So you learned at a lot earlier age than I did how important engagement is with the employees. I kind of come from old school. You get to work and get busy yourself. You have to engage your employees in a lot of different ways to make them feel valued and make them productive. I mean, that's just, there's no other way to do that. So I appreciate your leadership with that. Any others have comments around that question?
I think internships are kind of a buzzword that's a starting point, but in an area that I've really leaned into and other CAPS programs in the St. Louis area have tapped into, that we've found to be much more successful in developing a relationship within our students and those businesses, are client-connected projects. And our goal as a CAPS program with all of our instructors who are facilitators of learning is, I'm always asking businesses, what's on your to-do list, 10 to 15 on that to-do list that you would, typically give you an intern, or you might, hand that project off in that capacity to get it taken care of. Tell us what those things are, and then allow my instructor teams to develop a strategy or approach to tackle those projects. Give us, come in, bring your team in, tell us what the problem is, give us deliverables, give us a timeline, and then be open to the idea of providing a pathway for those student teams to check in with, your experts at your business, or to have access to information during that time frame, and then on the back end come in and let those students kind of pitch their ideas and their solutions, and have you give them feedback, and have that feedback be that level of authenticity that they crave. So having those opportunities and creating those pathways is just another opportunity in many cases, which is less of an ask or less difficult to try to form for businesses outside of apprenticeships and internships that really provide high value to students, whether they're in a CAPS program or they're in a business incubator across the St. Louis metropolitan area that schools offer. So those are definitely some things that to add to that are out there.
Well, in other words, to me, what I'm hearing you say, it's falling on educators to start this engagement piece much earlier in a child's or a college student's educational pathway.
Yes.
That we have to change the way we deliver instruction. We have to.
Or where we deliver that instruction.
Exactly. I mean, there has to be that connection. The earlier you can start a young person on this engagement strategy, I think the more successful they'll be, much better chance of retaining them in a career at an employer in St. Louis. That's great. Okay, Barry.
Yes.
Many organizations are competing for talent in a challenging labor market. You saw some of the data that Rob showed earlier. What retention strategies have proven effective regardless of an employee's age or career stage?
I'm fairly simple in this regard. It may be simple, but it's not easy. To me, if you want to retain employees, you have to create an environment and build relationships where employees want to be. So I look at all those small interactions as debits and credits, and you have to build that up. You have to create a culture that's intentional about creating time and space for people to join together, to get to know each other, to build those bonds. There's the old cliche that you don't leave your company, you leave your manager. And I do think there's significant truth to that. But I'd also argue that when and if things get a little stressful, you stay and possibly thrive because you're focused on the people to your left and right and working towards that common goal together. So to me, like culture is created every interaction, every relationship, one step at a time through all those small little deposits. I mean, it's easy to take a giant credit if something goes wrong, but for the most part, if you're trying to continuously improve and focusing on your workforce, then they will see that and they will reciprocate it. It becomes a relationship and not a transaction. And I think that's a lot of the reason why Murphy Company has a retention rate of 12 and a half, really closer to 15 years if you exclude new positions. It's just because we see our employees pouring into our clients and into our projects, so we try to pour into them in turn.
That's great. Yeah, well, that's, a lesson for all of us in regards to how we can retain employees. We invest so much to get them in the door and get started and train them to get them oriented to their work. We just have to be mindful as leaders of how we keep that workforce strong. Okay, Tom. Public sector organizations are sometimes perceived as offering stability, while younger workers may prioritize rapid advancement and flexibility. How do you attract and retain talent across multiple generations in today's labor market?
It's very difficult. Working in the public sector, we have a lot of competition. Obviously, again, there's a lot of work going on in the St. Louis region, lots of heavy contractors, design firms that, again, quite frankly, have a higher salary than what a state agency does. So a lot of our retraction and attention for employees talks about the stability of working for the DOT. We have obviously a lot of benefits that we offer that maybe other firms don't or other companies don't. And really, we do try to foster a very enjoyable workforce. And so whether it's a younger generation or even an older generation, we do different things. We're not as rigid as maybe some of my earlier comments may have led to believe. And one example that I'll give is that every single year in April, we hold an innovation showcase. And this is a statewide effort that MoDOT has that we do internally. And we allow our employees to come up with an innovation. It could be something small, it could be something really large of a change, but we give them that kind of freedom to work on something that may help us do our jobs better, safer, or a little bit faster. And every single year there's new ideas, and largely those ideas come from the younger employees. I mean, they come in and say, well, you old guys are doing it this way. Let me show you a better way. And they'll develop it and then showcase it. And they'll get a little bit of a incentive for doing that, a little bit of a bonus, if you will. But ultimately, we reward them with money that they can spend for their team. So they do something that helps their whole team, then do something, whether it's additional resource information or a tool or equipment or something that they can purchase through our funding. But it kind of gives them that idea that you don't have to just do things black and white by the book, exactly how it's been done for a century. You can do something a little bit different. So we try to create that environment where you can be a little bit, think outside the box. And employees really engage with that.
So I have a question on that.
Sure.
And it's interesting you say that, because if you have folks that have done it this way for centuries, what did you find, or what was your intention around helping to transition that kind of approach from doing things the way that we have? Because that can be challenging for your senior employees. And I know you talked about incentivizing, right? So it's like if we win as a team or we don't win as a team. What did you see as some of the barriers for those tenured employees and getting them to understand, okay, we have done it this way, but let's look at what this next generation is bringing to the table and have an open mind?
There are some of the older generation is sometimes resistant to doing it differently, so that definitely that does happen. But just as a small example, I mean, someone will come up with just a different way of, and oftentimes these are field employees that will weld on a piece of metal onto a truck, and it just helps to be able to provide, like, instead of setting out cones one by one, it actually like allows for the cones to be almost on like a little conveyor belt that's on the back of a truck, so they don't actually have to get out of the truck to set the cones on the roadway. They just do something a little bit different, and they come up with something creative to make it done better. And again, some of the older folks may not like it, but in time, people do kind of gravitate towards it. And even just like computer technology things, I mean, that's what the newer generation is going to use anyway. So when they're developing a new program or tweaking an existing program, they're just doing it because they see a way to do a task more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Tim, back to you. From conversations with your students as well as your business partners, what do you see the biggest disconnect between what employers need and what younger workers expect from the workplace?
Well, I think we can all agree that that constantly changes. So the way that we kind of approach that is by asking for feedback from our student cohorts and then from all of the business professionals and business partners that we have, and asking them that question directly. Where are your gaps? Where are the things that your new employees are coming in, the State of the St. Louis Workforce Report? And then we reverse engineer, as part of our program, a process of deprogramming the high school approach to dealing with issues. And we call it Professional Skills Boot Camp. And for the first 8 weeks of the program, we hyper-focus on those areas of need that, employers are saying this is what we wish more of our employees came in prepared with, and then by osmosis, those students are then picking up on that through that experience. So, goal setting, time and project management, professional communication, teamwork, understanding your strengths, creating, conflict resolution, and then solving complex problems in groups or individually, like creating those processes, and then really leaning in on content experts and local professionals and businesses as mentors or professional guest speakers, and kind of giving them an opportunity to engage those students on what those areas, those gaps are, and then giving them that opportunity to practice those skills and to fail, but fail forward, and not in an environment where they're kind of used to getting a bad grade. Creating that pathway and creating that opportunity definitely removes that barrier on what those needs are and what those expectations that our students have, because they don't know what they don't know. They only know what they're able to find on Instagram or whatever their friends and other pathways. So by eliminating that murkiness and giving them that opportunity to hear directly from the source, here's what we're looking for, here are some key things that'll elevate you and give you a chance to get your foot in the door, they're all ears. They want that, they crave that. So intentionally creating feedback loops with our student cohorts, and then also with the professionals, business partners, and everyone, education, higher education, and creating a systems approach every year to try to tackle those and make sure our students are aware of that.
That's a great example. The employers, I'm sure you find that valuable, to have that connection, and employers that you serve.
Our partnerships are the lifeblood of our program, and we're truly grateful for all the local businesses and small, medium, large businesses that have made the decision to invest time and access to our instructors and students that make the choice to apply and engage with the St. Louis CAPS program. So it works really well together.
Okay, Sharon, here comes the really, this is the hardball question you're going to answer for us. And the others feel, if you feel compelled, please share your experience as well. So from an HR leadership perspective, what is one policy, program, or cultural practice that has been most effective in retaining employees across different generations?
I will say, if it has to be one, is listening. I remember my grandmother telling me, when I was younger, and just in general, she had all these sayings, and she would say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen. I always want you to remember to listen more than you speak. And so if you're listening and engaging with what is needed within the workplace, I think that's the key. The other piece, though, I'm an advocate for assessments and also, engagement surveys. So it's really helpful to understand what you need to respond to and how you should respond. And we can sit in a room and come up with some really great ideas. And I know being strategic is a part of what we need to do. But when you have engagement surveys, it really helps you to understand what you're doing well and then the areas of opportunity. And so you gather that feedback, and it doesn't mean you'll implement everything that you're given, but one, it allows your team to know that they're being heard. And then you report out on what that survey is, even if it's just the brutal, honest truth, and then figure out, what that path forward looks like.
I couldn't agree more with everything you said, so I'm going to switch gears and go a little bit more of a training and development lens. Focus in on and pour into the people on the front lines, your emerging or frontline leaders. Go to where the work's happening. They're in a unique spot to where you pour into them can flow up and down and spread a lot more quickly. And if I had to add one thing on that training, it would be feedback training, because if people are getting timely and accurate feedback, then those managers are seeing those efforts applied and go from saying, I don't have time to do this, to see it truly saving them time, and eventually it can turn into a flywheel of continuous improvement.
That is so true, Barry. My phrase is, you don't, and I say this intentionally, those in the educational field don't shun me for this, but you don't not have time. And I say that because I'm hoping it sticks. I don't know if it does, but to your point, the time you take now is going to save you time later in resources, backfilling. It's a domino effect, so that's a very valid point.
Okay, Barry, back to you. You've led teams in both human resources and in the military. How has your experience managing people across different generations shaped your views on leadership, mentorship, and retention?
I'm going to take this back through a story. When I was 19 years old, I grew up in a very small, rural, blue-collar town in southern Illinois, and I went into the Illinois Army National Guard thinking this is an easy way to get my college paid for. And then I show up at boot camp, and suddenly I'm living in the same room with 59 other individuals. And at first, my thought was quite simply, oh shit, what have I got myself into? Everyone felt different than me, for the most part. But as time went on, we all worked very hard towards common goals together. And there were times where we'd be polishing boots or cleaning rifles and just talking. And once that surface level judgment, like you're not like me, dropped, you really start to realize how much most individuals, we're far more alike than we're different. So I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned. But I'd also say the people I've followed, it's kind of like I can't look at you guys and say, hey, I'm funny. You either laugh or you don't. Someone doesn't get to look out at a crowd and say, I'm a leader. You are a leader if people choose to follow you. If you're a manager, sure, you can lean on your rank, your hierarchy, and boss people around and probably get short-term results. But at the end of the day, the people you follow are the people that are leading by example, people that are never asking you to do something they couldn't or wouldn't do themselves. And they demonstrate that, and they care deeply, and they get to know you beyond those surface levels. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about closing that proximity and just truly getting to know your people, building that trust, and then if they buy in, then they will follow you, and you don't even have to tell them what to do. You can just ask, and it works.
Very good. Tom, another tough question here. The one I think about a lot with our college is our workforce continues to age. And as many of your workers approach retirement, succession planning becomes increasingly important. What lessons has MoDOT learned about preparing for the next generation of leaders and technical experts?
Well, I think one of the programs that we have, and it crosses all of our departments, is having some kind of leadership training. So again, even for our maintenance employees, there's a maintenance leadership academy that we send employees through who want to become crew leaders and building supervisors and maintenance superintendents and on up the chain, that we give them the skill set, because someone who's coming into the maintenance side is not necessarily equipped with the communication skills and the note-taking skills, purchasing authority. I mean, all these different things that they need to make decisions about, we teach them. We do the same thing with our other leaders, and the more, even on the technical side, we also give them other skill sets too, because as engineers, we're not necessarily renowned for our people skills. We're not necessarily the best. We like to talk to our shoes or our or our plan sheets, but not to other people. So we really invest a lot of time and effort into helping our engineers and our maintenance employees and everyone across our organization. If you want to become a leader within MoDOT, if you want to move up the chain, we help you in that process. And I think that helps show them that we're investing in them as employees, and that helps retention. It's not perfect, but if we don't do that, we're not going to keep anyone who's worth investing in if we don't pull our take our time to do the right thing to help them.
I mean, from my perspective, you're failing as a leader if you don't do all that.
Yeah.
We work very hard and continue to work hard at building a bench. I call it building a bench within the college of the next generation of leaders. And so we offer different academies, as you mentioned. We have a leadership academy, an academy for managers. We have an academy for aspiring leaders. I think every employer in this room can understand the importance and significance of that, particularly given the situation we're in. We really have to depend on ourselves to bring up the next group of leaders, given the shortage of workers that are currently in place and will continue to be for some time. So that's a great observation. Okay, Tim, students participating in CAPS gain exposure to workplace environments before graduation. What characteristics continually stand out among employers that successfully engage and retain young talent?
Well, CAPS is not just St. Louis CAPS and my district partners. There are multiple CAPS programs in the St. Louis area. Parkway and Rockwood have Spark. The St. Charles County CAPS, all the public school districts of St. Charles County, the Catalyst with Clayton, Brentwood, and Ladue. Hazelwood has a CAPS program for a CNA program. CAPS is a national program. There's over 180 plus programs across the United States. It started in the Blue Valley School District, so there's a local tie on the Kansas City side that it began. But we're all in a situation where, as I mentioned, our business partners and partnerships are our lifeblood. So the employers the characteristics that consistently stand out among the employers that are engaging and keeping that talent is the willingness to be responsive and kind of approaching our relationship with an entrepreneurial mindset, which are both CAPS core values. I approach businesses, now we're at a point where businesses are contacting us and saying, we really like what you do. But initially in those conversations, those early conversations to create those partnerships, it would just be, would you be willing to be a mentor? Would you be willing to serve on a mock interview panel or bring a team of your professionals for a mock interview, a more advanced version of a mock interview? We have these opportunities to engage. Would you be willing to host or attend a networking event so that we can kind of model these opportunities for our students? That then becomes a site visit. Then you get an opportunity to showcase the culture of your business environment, employees, what you're looking for, everything we've already talked about. And then that also can become a pathway to those client-connected projects that I mentioned. And ultimately, do we want opportunities for students to have long-term internship opportunities? Yes, but ultimately you have to build that trust, and you have to have the right people in place. My instructor team are amazing, and they do a phenomenal job building that trust, creating pathways, and showing a partnership with employers. Like, I'm not just going to come in and say, hey, gimme, 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 and expect red carpets and everything. Like, you're working. You have jobs to do. You have tremendous amount of things that you're responsible for. So we want to meet you halfway, if not more. Tell us what those needs are. Tell us what those ideas are. Tell us what you're comfortable with. We'll create the framework. We'll create the structure. We'll come back to you and then create those opportunities that ultimately create the ROI that we're talking about here, which is to keep talent in St. Louis. So, those are the two areas that consistently come up. Being responsive, being open. What else could we do? Let's talk more about, and then that entrepreneurial mindset of growing, adapting. One of our business partners that has grown over the last 3 years is using the internship opportunity that we allow students to interview for. They interview students for that opportunity as their leadership, staff leadership initiative. Like, as part of their developing talent, your bench, or as I like to say, a AAA farm system, as a baseball fan, how do you develop your leaders? They are using our program, internship opportunity, to create an opportunity for their aspiring leaders. This is part of that experience. You're going to take on an intern, and you're going to engage them and create that opportunity. So we're so grateful to be at a point where we have business partners that are willing to bring us into the fold at that level.
Well, yeah, thanks, Tim. And just given the situation of demographics, it seems like we have to be quicker, faster, more efficient in placing students with employers, or graduates from high school or college with employers, so when they land, they're ready.
100%.
Yeah, that's basically what CAPS is doing, and I think colleges and universities now have to do that.
Well, I think
so different back when I went to university 1,000 years ago. Yeah.
And we appreciate all the professionals that give that critical advice to our students about where are great places to go, and that's part of those relationships. Where did you go to school? What was that program like? Creating values. So it empowers the student, it empowers parents, it empowers all of the players in that process, and gives them much more confidence that transition that they are going to be making, leaving an environment where they're not the educational decision maker, and then magically the minute that they step foot on that college campus, we are creating a true transition for families and students to confidently be able to navigate that very, very complex transition from high school to college and feel grounded in knowing this is where I need to be, this is where I want to pursue that opportunity, and being able to navigate a lot of challenges very successfully through our professional skills boot camps and all of the different opportunities that they're exposed to as part of their time in the program.
All right, well, I think we have time for one more question for all of you before we go to ask the audience for any Q&A that they may have. So here it is. In one sentence or a few words, complete this statement. Organizations that successfully keep talent across generations will be the ones that blank.
I'll say adaptive. So we talked about training, development. Career growth is an outlier, and so you have to look at what worked before, and even with training, like pulling in a slide deck. I think someone talked earlier about having your younger workforce. Pulling out a slide deck and trying to go through training, that's not going to work. We found that it's important to use tools with technology, to your point, micro-dose learning, and rolling out training that works for each group. And then, of course, for those that prefer that format, and that's the same with the leadership team, but it's really about being adaptive. So knowing your target audience and then adapting to what is most important now. But then the other piece is, how do we get better at learning what's to come in that change in the future, so that you're adaptive but responding more, proactively rather than responding to the current issue at that time.
I think the word that I would go with, or to finish that sentence, is being inclusive to all the generations, so that you're listening to the younger generation and their new ideas. Again, my example of the Innovations Challenge and the showcase, like that, we're listening to those employees, but also we use our older employees or more experienced employees for the experience, knowledge, and we even ask them to do, put on training for the young. They actually get energized by putting together a small training program to teach a group of new construction inspectors or whatever it is. So there's different ways of like pulling talent from each of those age groups and generation groups, and I think as an employer you have to recognize that and not say, well, you have to do it this way because I say so.
I would say to intentionally and proactively invest in building internal relationships with the same intent and vigor as you do business strategy.
I think it's all about creating value. I already touched on that, but creating a culture where everyone is valued and appreciated for what they bring to the table, and how those talents and their skill sets benefit each other and the company or business as a whole.
I go back to when I was teaching at the community college level. I would always be so glad when I would see an older student with a bunch of the 17 and 18-year-olds that had all this life experience that they could share with the younger students, and the younger students could energize the older students in a different way. But I would see, and I see this as an employer, our more experienced employees draw out and bring in the new employees coming in. And I think it falls on those that have been there a while to provide that shepherding, maybe is the wrong word, I don't know, mentorship, whatever you would call that, that we just have to build that culture within the college. Because again, for us, it's about trying to keep employees and build that bench, so to speak, going forward. Well, before we go to questions for the audience, could we all please give a great round of applause for our panelists? Thank you. You've all done a terrific job. And so you have all these experts sitting up here in front of you. Do any of you have any questions that they might like to answer? We will need a microphone, I'm sure. Here we go. Run a mic down. Yeah, there we go.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. A lovely theme, and I had the pleasure of looking at lots of the data that was inside of the report. But I want to ask a specific question to the employer's side that has to do with the data that Dr. Rob Lee chose to highlight, which was what your main obstacle is. And it seemed like when we looked at the 2015 to 2025 comparisons, something that's skyrocketed is a lack of work ethic. So what I'm curious about is when you're having your hiring managers interview prospective employees, what kind of questions are you asking to filter through those without work ethic, or what would you be looking for? I imagine that your $500 or less or so professional development or enrichment doesn't involve things like how to be loyal to our company, or how to have good work ethic, or how to be a better person in general so you can do your job better. So how, as an employer, are you looking at this obstacle of a lack of work ethic? And then for me personally, I'd want to know how I can potentially start to solve those problems in the classroom so that they can be better off when they come to you.
that's a really good question. And thank you for that. You know, that is where it starts. So we appreciate you and that partnership because it does. It's what I tell candidates when they come in is that this isn't a one-sided interview. They're interviewing us as we're interviewing them. And so one thing we focus on is hiring athletes. That's how you have to be wired. Now, behavioral interview questions are very helpful. And then focus on where they fit within your culture. But another piece that we use, and this isn't an end-all be-all, but it's assessments. And there are assessments out there that help understand from a cultural perspective where that candidate sits. And so having that before they come in, you can prepare specific questions that can help you kind of identify maybe where they'll need a little bit more mentoring or hone in on different aspects of their background that can help you understand where that assessment is taking you. But we really focus on, you know, that athletic approach because that's just how someone's wired. And if you come in, we can teach you how to do the job for the most part, but we can't teach you to be internally motivated, to your point, to have that work ethic. And so having that conversation with you as an employer is really great. And we do that with groups that we have on the apprentice side of our programs. It's helping to understand what we're looking at, whether it's some of the testing coming in or the OJT, what does that really look like? And then you can kind of identify what works for each candidate.
Instead of a magic question, I would say follow-up questions. It's almost like a root cause analysis or peeling the onion. It's really easy to give a strong surface level answer to most questions, especially as technology has improved and can almost run people through all that. But if you keep asking why and tell me more, sooner or later you start to see where the resilience does or doesn't come into play. So I would say if I'm trying to figure out what someone has, I'm going to ask them about a question on sacrifice or difficulty and then just try to peel it back to really get how they were thinking and what they were thinking as opposed to what they were doing.
We have one more question over here.
So thank you all. The panel was great. I just got a lot of my questions answered. But I usually have the answers for everything literally in my brain as an employer. But the problem I'm running into is I have employees that are, it's a broad range from early 30s to maybe late 50s. And I can tell that the passion is there for the patients that we serve. I'm in healthcare. We're veteran driven. However, I am overpaying for underperformance. And I overpay because what's going on in this current state that we're in. Mental health is on the rise and people are barely making it in Missouri. I see my employees maybe work for me. We work 4 days a week because I close 1 day a week because it's not there in this current job market, and it costs more for me to open than to stay closed. So, and to give them a day off because we deal so much in the mental health capacity, and that has worked. We are compassionate care workers, as such other healthcare workers. But with the overpay, I feel like there's a relaxation period somewhere. I feel like their productivity period is not there. And if I'm not there, if I'm there and I'm working, just for instance, a good example, my front desk, there might be 25 patients that come through the door. When I'm not there, there's 15 patients that come through the door. So there's a laxation, but I'm stuck between, do I go and scout new talent because I know what I have with them? Or do I try to do something different with them?
Yeah.
So, Ms. Barnes, you've given some good insight on how you...
Well, I don't know if it's good, but I'll give you my perspective, and that's an excellent question. What I would say initially is yes. The term that I'm sure everyone has heard a time or two is coach them up or coach them out. So I'm very deliberate in being compassionate to understanding how to meet people where they are. So if you understand where that's coming from, where those areas of opportunity are, and then have the right conversation, because sometimes people may not know. I think it was mentioned earlier, timely feedback. And so I've seen instances where employees don't know that they're not doing the right thing and they're thinking they are. And it's performance review time, and it's like, well, this whole year I thought I was doing great. So sometimes it's about just having that conversation and saying, okay, here's what the expectations are, and here's how we're going to make sure that you're accountable. And accountability doesn't have to be negative. Accountability is what we should all strive to be within our own capacities, right? And so having that conversation, outlining where the areas of opportunity are, but then you being that support system and saying, hey, how are we going to get you there? Because if you're interactive with your team member, they'll feel that value, they'll feel that you're listening, and then hopefully you can work towards a solution together.
Okay, thank you.
I think to add to that, that's a really difficult question, but I think that it's the balance of having the expectations and accountability, but also I think what I see is some of our most productive work groups are the ones that have great accountability. They almost have like competitions with their other adjacent buildings or work groups to try to do a little better. They try to have a little fun with it, so it's not like there's no quota that has to be met, but they almost try to like build upon some kind of fun activity, even though it's work. They don't necessarily want to work, but if you add something else into it that just adds a different flavor, helps out too. So it's sort of the enjoyable workplace environment helps out too.
I would add reward effort.
Yeah.
Focus in on those that are trying and really try to pour into them. As much as I appreciate being calling an expert, you're not alone. We're all dealing with this day in and day out, and no one's cracked this code, but unfortunately, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, but ultimately, systems operate and perform the way the system is designed. So if you need to make a tweak to that system, that tweak needs to be there. And that's not always easy, and it's not necessarily good when the market's hard and it's hard to replace that individual and you don't know what you have with that individual, but sometimes you have to prioritize and try to shift that culture one piece at a time.
I think we have one more.
I'm not hiring anybody, but anytime that we can create a gamification aspect of the learning in our program, or whatever we're doing a client project, if we can have multiple teams and we use different approaches to develop those teams and put those teams together to sometimes intentionally create conflict based on what we know about our students from some of the assessments that we give them, like to put them in that difficult spot, knowing that it could blow up, like, so be it. It's a great learning opportunity, but competition's always great and definitely creates opportunities.
Well, let's give another round of applause for our great panelists. They did a terrific job. I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to get and sit and chat with you all some. I'm taking away some ideas for my team, so thank you for sharing all that. So we've heard from the employers. Next up, we're going to hear from employees. So we're going to take a little different slant. Dr. DeAndre Braddox will be leading that effort from St. Louis Community College. So I think we're ready to transition off stage. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to take about a 5-minute break while we change out the panels, and then DeAndre Braddox will be up here with the employee perspective.
Good morning. Hello? All right. We're ready to get started again. If you could please find your seats.
Use your playground voice.
All right. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Again, we're ready to get started. My name is DeAndre Braddox, and I am so excited to serve as the moderator for our employee panel, where we'll be bridging the generational perspectives across the workplace. And I'm so excited to introduce our esteemed panelists. But before we get to that, I think it's important to provide a little bit of context for our conversation. As the last panel so effectively highlighted, the people that comprise our organizations, regardless of industry, are not a monolith. There's different traits and attributes that they bring to their work. And oftentimes we can associate those differences to the different generations that our employees fall into. And there's always exceptions to every rule, so I want to make sure that that's noted. But extensive research on this topic shows us that there are common traits that each generation brings to their work, and oftentimes you can attribute that to major events that happen during those formative years. And so I'm really excited about our panelists who represent the different generations, who are going to talk a little bit about their own unique experiences. It would be extremely unfair for me to ask them to represent their entire generation, so they won't be doing that today. Instead, they'll be speaking on their own behalf, talking about their own experiences and perspective through a generational lens. Okay, so the audience breakdown in terms of generation. What we see is that the vast majority of our audience today are Gen Xers. All right? Yeah, all right. This is not surprising because Gen Xers are filling a majority of senior leadership roles. So of course, senior leaders in our region would want to come to the state of the St. Louis workforce to find out what's going on. Then our second largest group represented today are millennials. All right, show some love to millennials. Great. Millennials are the largest generation in the workforce right now. So of course, we figured that they would be well represented today. Then we have our baby boomers coming in third today. All right, a little bit of love for the baby boomers. So again, this isn't surprising that they're coming in third in terms of representation because we're seeing a continued exodus of baby boomers from the workforce, given the fact that their youngest members are hitting retirement age. And then lastly, we see Gen Z. And, all right. And again, this isn't surprising that they're the smallest group represented today because they're the newest generation in the workforce. And let's be honest, they're probably the ones back at the office holding down the fort while you're here today. So, all right. So with that said, let's now introduce our panelists. And as they're doing introductions, you'll see behind me information displayed regarding their respective generation. If you take umbrage with anything you see listed, take issue with Deloitte, call their customer service hotline, because the information comes from them. They do a lot of great research in regards to generations, and so we thought that they were the best source to pull from. So first up, we have our baby boomer. And I'm going to give our baby boomer the opportunity to introduce herself, including your role and the way that you engage with other generations.
Thank you, DeAndre. Thanks for having me here today. I'm Sharon Spurlock. I am representing the boomers. I'm going to be a real boomer and tell you I've been in my organization for 37 years. I work at the St. Louis ARC. I'm the senior director of family education. So I naturally have to work with people across all generations. At the ARC, we serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families across their lifespan. So I'm working with new families, I'm working with families with teenagers, I work with aging families who have adults that they're trying to figure out what their lives are going to look like after they're gone, and each of them bring a different perspective to the job. Within the workplace, my supervisor's a millennial. I have many different people I work with across departments of all generations, and it's really wonderful to be able to have all their perspectives.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. And follow-up, thinking about the traits that are commonly associated with your generation, from your own experience, do you agree with those traits? And if you had to identify a major event that you think influences how baby boomers show up in the workplace, what would that be?
Yeah, well, this is certainly influenced by the work I do, I think. I do think, the loyalty piece, I can definitely give a thumbs up for that. And we have a lot of people in our organization that have been with us 30 plus years. So we're lucky to have a great boomer contingent. Certainly for me, I think the civil rights movement has impacted the work we do the most and the work how I do the work the most. As the civil rights movement, gay rights was occurring, so was disability rights and movement out of institutions, laws that were created to help all children be able to go to school and get a proper education. And so all those things have influenced the work we do and the expectations that we have for all people to be able to participate in community life.
Thank you. Next up, we have our Gen Xer. Please introduce yourself, including the work that you do with individuals from other generations.
Sure. I'm Dr. Natisha Small, and I'm the CEO for Girl Scouts of Eastern Missouri. Every single day I have an opportunity where we work with over 23,000 girls and a little bit over 11,000 volunteers across 28 counties. And so I truly get a chance and opportunity to work with all of our age groups, which is also a fantastic treat as well. So I think that one of the most rewarding things that I see in this leadership role is, one, leading the strategic direction of the council and working with all of these generations to help really push our mission and our goals to serve the individuals that represent so many different demographic groups of urban, suburban, and rural. And that's what I love the most about sitting in this seat.
Okay. The same follow-up question for you. Thinking about the traits associated with Gen Xers, from your own experience, fair, unfair, and what would be a major event?
No, I actually chuckled a little bit when I read it, because I do think so many of it resonated with, I'll say for me personally, I feel that it did. I think we are extremely ambitious and passionate. Family first is also one of those big things. I don't know if any of the Gen Xers out there, but work-life balance is key. I'm working on that better, even though I'm a Gen Xer.
Aren't we all?
I think we went through some tremendous learning opportunities in Gen X. I mean, I was in high school doing a typewriter, and then you go to college and you're in a computer, right? We went from the phones on the wall to cell phones, and with the ones that look like huge speakers sitting on the side of your ear when you're trying to be cool. So there were so many significant things that happened during that time. We experienced also the devastation of 9/11 and what that looked like for all of us. So there was a lot of things that I think kind of played into who we are as beings. I think we certainly are that sandwich generation, where we're balancing the leadership, the accountability, but also being extremely empathetic and very much so into having a servant leadership mindset, how to make change. I think there's a little bit of a line of delineation, but some commonality, even with the boomers. There's some close connection there, but extremely mission driven. So I did find it very interesting. And some of those descriptors fit very well.
Great, thank you. And we have questions coming up for Natisha regarding the sandwich generation and also Gen Alpha, who her organization is predominantly working with. So, yeah. All right, so next up we have our millennials. And you might be questioning, why are there 2 millennials and only 1 of every other generation?
Awesome.
As a millennial, I'll be quiet on that one. But it's because millennials, again, are the largest generation in the workforce. And so we thought that it was important to have dual perspectives for such a large generation. So Travis, you first. Please introduce yourself, including the work that you do with people from other generations.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Travis Wood, I'm the Senior Director at Citizens for Modern Transit. We promote the importance of public transit to the region. It's really the connective tissue, right? It's driving economic development, access to opportunity. And if you've ever gotten on Metrolink or Metrobus, you know that you're immediately part that day on your way to work or wherever you're going of a cross-section of the community. So I think in a society where we are siloed in lots of different ways, including maybe how we're commuting, public transit brings everybody together. And obviously there are a variety of different perspectives from younger generations that are really looking at public transit and maybe that impact on the environment versus older generations that, want to age in place, want to have independence, ability to get around, but maybe aren't driving anymore. So it really does cross across generations.
Thank you. So looking at your generational traits, fair, unfair, and what would be a major event that you think influenced your generation?
I'm going to be honest, I had a little problem when I was looking at the millennial traits because I find myself really straddling, as in, if I'd been born a year earlier, I would be representing Gen X.
Yeah.
So,
So cusper.
very much the elder millennial. I think I've found Xennial, Zennial, there's these different micro-generation terms. So I kind of picked and chose, like when I look at the millennial traits, I really do connect with that sort of meaningful, purpose-driven work, as well as just a comfort with technology and digital communication. But when I look at the Gen X traits, I mean, that independent sort of self-driven style and work, I do feel connected to that as well, and just adapting to change.
So you picked the best traits from each generation?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't know that was possible, but okay.
I don't know how that happened. And just to add on with an event, I really appreciate this question because it's something that I don't think I thought about for myself. And I had kind of a visceral reaction when I was looking at it. And for the millennial, events, the Great Recession really had a big impact on my career. When I graduated, I volunteered with AmeriCorps. I worked at the zoo for a few years. That's a story for another day. And then I was working in the corporate environment when the Great Recession hit, and I saw people who had, worked in the same position or the same company for decades. They were there one day and they were gone the next, right? Whole divisions, gone, and lots of change and upheaval and evolution for companies to get through that. So I think when it comes to the loyalty piece with employers, employees, events like that, depending on where you were in your progression, can be really impactful.
Yeah. And to that point, so you look at one of the traits, highest career mobility of any generation, 6 out of 10 millennials, according to Gallup, are open to exploring new opportunities, including moving for a job, leaving the current industry they're in and shifting to another, which is why they have that designation of being highly mobile. And it is interesting to think about the Great Recession and how that could have led to that.
Sure.
Thank you. Hillary, please introduce yourself.
Aren't we just awesome, like millennials? Woo. I told myself I was going to be a professional on this stage, not embarrass DeAndre for inviting me, but sometimes I just can't help myself. So thank you so much, DeAndre and team, for the invitation and for being here. My name is Hillary Fry, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of STL Youth Jobs. We are a youth employment organization that provides meaningful work opportunities to youth ages 14 to 24 from disinvested communities within St. Louis City and County. So I am a millennial, but I also represent an organization that is preparing the future workforce. I've been in this role for 11 years, so have some experience across the generation. Kids these days, that term comes up every year. We're always identifying with, looking for ways to explore how to better engage, how to pivot, and how to serve them in a better way and really lift them up, and also just meeting them where they are and helping them to access opportunities. And also the other piece of the work that I do is working with employers in the region and also working with employers to be prepared for the future workforce because it is different, because of different generations. And then I'll follow up on the trait because I'm so prepared. The things that resonate the most with me about the millennial data that DeAndre has provided is the flexibility and the work-life balance piece. When I started this job, I was 8 months pregnant. I'm the first executive director, not the founder of the organization. And so I was grappling with this reality of I'm about to have a baby and then I'm going to go back to work, and how is that going to look for me, first-time parent at the time. And so out of necessity, just created a very flexible work environment because I had to have it. And I think that's one of the things that I feel so fortunate about, is to have been able to create a culture like that. And I'll bring in COVID-19 as a result of that, because our team and the way that we do the work and have structured the culture of STL Youth Jobs is very flexible and is very adaptive. And so, obviously it was incredibly challenging from a youth programming perspective, as well as just our own personal lives blending with our professional lives. But I felt very prepared to take that on because of that piece of, having flexible work-life balance. That also sometimes means that I'm available all the time and then I'm not available for me all the time. So.
Well, because millennials are known to expect frequent feedback. Great job, Hillary. Thank you. Appreciate that. And Hillary will be providing some cover and assistance to Wendell, who is our Gen Z representative today.
Yeah. Hello. My name is Wendell Stapleton. Thank you so much, Dr. Braddox and St. Louis Community College for having me here today. As I already stated, my name is Wendell Stapleton, and I currently serve as program manager for the completion pillar of the Missouri College and Career Attainment Network. Primarily, our work impacts generations by our free to low-cost professional development opportunities for professionals within the education ecosystem. Those are people that work at colleges, universities, nonprofits, community-based organizations. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces here, so I know that we're working across generations. In terms of identifying with these traits, like my friend over here, I'm also a cusper, right? A couple of years earlier, I'd be a millennial. Up until I was 16, I was counted as a millennial, right? So I will identify with a lot of those traits. But when it comes to the Gen Z, I kind of like it. I think it's a really good encapsulation of it all. But I do have to be, as a Gen Zer, a bit extra right now and say that there are two major events that have impacted our space within the workforce. Number one, COVID-19. We've all experienced it. I'm sure I don't have to explain that to the rest of this group. But the second being these types of conversations. I don't think any other generation has had the opportunity to be analyzed and prepared for as Gen Z has, right? Millennials faced a lot of scrutiny. Once again, cusper, I got a lot of that too. But for Gen Z, we're the first ones having these. So
that's a great point. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so now we're going to move into our questions from a generational perspective. So Sharon, baby boomers currently represent about 15% of today's workforce, and as many prepare for retirement, they're taking with them decades of experience and institutional knowledge. As a baby boomer, what is one workplace practice or value from your generation that you hope never disappears?
Somebody mentioned earlier how to motivate your workforce, and I think finding out or nurturing initiative in people is really important. Something I find from the generation that I work with is that we identified a problem and we had a lot of initiative to go out and say we're going to fix it, which sounds strange because it was much more hierarchical theoretically, but I've never experienced that. I've always been able to say, hey, I see a gap, here's a way I think that we should fix that. I sometimes struggle. I understand the life-work balance ideal. I think it's important and I value it, but I also think that there's a space where I want people to take the initiative to push beyond their role, beyond their boundaries, and do what's best for the folks that we serve. And so I hope that that continues. And I think curiosity is important too. I want people to be curious about things and use that towards the outcomes of the job.
I love that. Let me ask, do you see tension points from a baby boomer perspective in the workplace with those kind of high expectations in regards to how people engage in their work versus the reality?
I do. I think it was expected of us that we were going to fill gaps. Other duties is assigned, and I don't think that's something that's embraced necessarily by other generations. As I prepare for retirement, they've hired 3 people to replace me, and there's still some jobs that are lingering, and I say, do you want to continue to offer this? Is there value in this? And maybe there's not. Sometimes I think that's one of the dangers of that piece is that you expand way outside your boundaries. And so I have to be honest and open to the idea that maybe some of the things I've been doing aren't important and aren't necessary to refill. But yeah, I don't know how to find that sweet spot.
Okay. I will say that when you referenced other duties as assigned, I think the HR professionals in the room lit up because they love that phrasing because it's in every job posting anywhere. All right, next up, Natisha. Gen X is often called the bridge or sandwich generation, leading organizations while caring for aging parents, supporting children, and mentoring younger colleagues. Being in the middle of generations often means learning from one generation while mentoring another. As a Gen Xer, what insight have you gained from standing at that intersection?
Yeah, sometimes it can definitely be a tough cross-sector to stand at, right? However, in my particular perspective, I actually enjoy embracing it. I'm not one that truly believes in that all of the experts in the room is the seniors that have been in the organization. I think there's a tremendous amount of leadership and ideas and thought that can come with anyone that wants to serve in that capacity to lead and help us to meet our goals. It is a tough situation because I'm also not into grouping. I think that we have to meet every single person where they are. And that looks different for each of us. Just like we said that we may all be Generation Xers or millennials, we're not all the same in that category, right? And I think we have to keep that in the forefront when we're working with the different populations and generations. But how do we adapt and how do we make that a culture and an opportunity where everybody can thrive in? To me, that's the biggest challenge, but it's also the opportunity. I heard, I believe it was Sharon earlier that talked about the micro-learning, and I kind of chuckled because that was one of the things that when I sat down with my chief of HR, it was, we have this generation who wants to sit down and they want to have the workshops and pen to paper. I'm a person who I like both. I like my checklist on paper, but I love putting my thoughts down in my little pad, right? How do we make sure that we're creating those training opportunities and that flexibility so that everyone can engage and they also feel heard with that? I'm also big on how do we create a culture where everybody can thrive. Opinions and experiences are going to vary, and that may bring on some healthy conflict, but how do we make sure that everyone knows how to respond to that conflict in a manner that's going to be healthy? And so I think it's a balance when you're working with cross-sector generations, and you have to consider all of that when you're working in an organization. It is not easy, and I'm not going to say that it is. And my hair has turned gray many times, and I just keep dyeing it. However, it's well worth it. I mean, and if you want a culture to thrive, if you want people to feel seen, valued, and heard, and again, respecting everyone to be a leader, not just one person, not just baby boomer or millennials or Gen Xers. I think everybody has the potential, and how do you tap into that and be creative to make sure you're meeting them where they are and creating that space where they can find that balance and learn from others. And really making sure that that's a part of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess it's just kind of dawning on me now, the maybe somewhat unique role that Gen Xers play, predominantly filling senior leadership roles, but caring for aging parents, so their appreciation for that generation, but then also supporting, young adult children, that you probably find yourself as a mediator between different generations at times.
Yeah, and fortunately, coming to Girl Scouts, that wasn't new to me, coming from a university where student success and workforce and college access was a part of my huge portfolio, right? And so coming into Girl Scouts, trust me, working with our volunteers is a lot different than I'm sitting down and talking to my donors, and how I'm working with the parents, and how I'm helping staff to navigate those difficult conversations with a volunteer who may be 60, 70. And they're working with someone who's 25, 28. And so it really does cause for a lot of adaptability, but it also calls for us to listen and listen to learn versus listen to be responsive.
Absolutely.
Because then you lose everything that could be valuable in finding that common ground.
Yes, great point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hillary, millennials now make up the largest segment of today's workforce. With that comes greater influence on workplace culture, leadership, and expectations. What responsibility do you think your generation has in shaping the future of work?
So somewhat similar to what Natisha said is, I do see, and I think this draws in my organization too, see us as being a translator and a liaison maybe between generations, because I understand, I mean, when I started my career, it was in a very different environment than what I work in now, that had a lot of hierarchy. And also respecting authority was a requirement, not an option. And it was a very high pressure environment, very polished. And that structured a lot of how I developed as a worker, moving into nonprofit work and the way that I viewed organizations. And I would say, hope Wendell agrees with me somewhat, there's definitely a breakdown in understanding hierarchy with this incoming generation. And I would say, I wouldn't say a lack of respect, but a lack of an understanding of that hierarchy, how it works, and then how we use that to our advantage to make ourselves more functional and more efficient. And I see our organization specifically as a translator of that and of helping prepare both ends of the workforce for what's ahead. It's going to look different because I think I understand the boomer population, the Gen X population. I'm married to a Gen X, so it's very personal for me. In a way that we are close enough to it that we can also communicate well with the younger generation. And help to create an understanding of how all these things working together are going to make us better from a work environment perspective and in our personal lives.
Thank you. Travis, same question.
Yeah, I think part of it is just making sure that we're having these discussions and these conversations, about the nature of work and how that's changing, and providing space within the work environment to do that. And maybe that means it's not just an annual review where there's a discussion of your role and what you're doing, but there's maybe, I don't know if I'd say less stressful situations that can be brought up for somebody to talk about, what is the nature of work for you? And thinking about that work ethic stat before, to push back a little, maybe some of it is just what we take as work ethic, or is that a discussion of maybe pseudo productivity, or how long a butt's in a chair, emails are answered versus actual progress on a mission or a goal, and that might look different for different people, and just having those conversations, understanding that. And then I think, and I'll speak as an elder millennial again, I do think we're uniquely positioned with sort of one foot in the analog and one foot in the digital space in terms of, grew up without a lot of these technologies, but are very comfortable with them as well. And has AI not been brought up yet? I can't believe that has happened. I don't want to be the one to do it, but I'm going to. I think that discussion of AI or other technologies, it's either the doom of everything or it's the savior of everything. I think our generation can kind of be a moderating force in that discussion and just, say, how can we use this? What are the benefits? What do we lose when we use it? And just making sure we're having space to have those conversations.
Thank you.
And on that point too, one of the traits was that we grew up alongside the internet, as opposed to fully integrated with the internet. Which if those of you that remember Oregon Trail and dial-up internet, it was only in one room of the house, and it was only during certain hours after your homework was done. But it is interesting to think about that as. Sometimes I feel like my mom, when she first got a debit card, when it's about AI, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Anyway.
Thank you. So, Wendell, we're going to shift to you from a Gen Z perspective. Gen Z is the fastest growing generation in today's workforce. And that said, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you, your unique perspective as a Gen Z employee. What is one thing you wish that people understood about your generation? And what is one lesson you think Gen Z can learn from other generations?
Got you. When it comes to Gen Z, as we've already highlighted on this panel, Gen Z is not a monolith, right? I wanted to make sure I started today by identifying myself as a cusper, because inside of all other spaces I'm in, I am the primary Gen Z example. And I am not representative of all Gen Zers at all whatsoever. So I hope that nuance is something that we bring into the space. On the flip side, I think that nuance should be carried over into Gen Z. I think that it's very easy for us to view every other generation as a monolith, right? We hear you guys champion the wonderful parts of your generations, and sometimes we experience and perpetuate the negative aspects of your generations, but you guys are still individuals, right? And how you guys show up in the workplace will still vary from industry to industry, from individual to individual, from space and from project to project. Those nuances are going to be integral for the continuation of all industries, in my opinion.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. So we're going to bounce around just a little bit based on the fact that we have about 5 minutes left. Natisha, I want to circle back to you because you have the unique opportunity to work closely with Gen Alpha that are going to be on our workforce at some point coming soon. And if we have concerns about Gen Z, what do we have to look forward to with Gen Alpha?
Completely.
And that's under 13, sorry, under 13 years of age, Gen Alpha.
Fearless.
What is it?
They're fearless.
Fearless, okay.
And I will use that fearless word in a good and a opportunity type way, right?
Yep. Love the euphemism, okay.
If there's such a thing. I think that we are going to, number one, encounter a generation that has been exposed to so much in life, good and bad, in dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. And it flows between high confidence, below confidence. And that's going to flow into the workplace as well, that balance that they're playing. We are also dealing with individuals that are unafraid to challenge and ask questions. They are definitely committed to the communities that they are surrounded by and seeing what happens in the world and advocating for themselves. But it's also a generation that needs opportunity. And I appreciated the question that was answered earlier on how we have to provide the access to opportunity. I typically add just one more thing, is that we have to provide access to opportunity in that action. We say it, but what are we going to do? In the generation that's coming next, they're going to be expecting that. And they want to be seen, they want to be listened to, they want to be valued, and they want to be heard. And we owe that to them. But they have carried a tremendous amount on their shoulders, and we have to listen to them, and we have to be empathetic in some spaces. However, with that being said, also making sure that they understand ownership and accountability and what that looks like. Because again, all of that is going to translate into the workforce and how they show up as leaders.
Yes. And it'd be interesting to see how they respond to other duties as assigned, because I can
well.
imagine there's going to be some negotiating happening.
Not well.
All right, rapid fire, so keep it about 30 seconds each. Since Travis brought up AI, the top reason employers gave us in our report for not using AI was a preference for human-centered work, cited by 58% of respondents. From each generation's perspective, what is one task in your work life that you would gladly hand off to AI, and what is one task that you would not want AI to touch? Anyone?
I'll jump in there really quick. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think for me, I equate it so far to GPS and like Google Maps and what I've lost using that all the time, and my spatial recognition, if it was ever there, being completely gone. I don't want to offload too much of my creativity and sort of the hard sort of organizing ideas and communicating those ideas that are so important to advocacy and public transit and growing that importance throughout the community. I like to use it to kind of look at something that's already been done and another set of eyes, in a small office, as opposed to doing some of that hard work of organizing my thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
You stole my words. You already stole what I was going to say. In a more practical sense, I'm fine with AI proofreading my work, but not creating or generating my work at all whatsoever. And I think that pretty much captures what you've already shared. So.
Okay, thank you. Others?
I love it for organizing. I love it for quickly identifying trends in data. I love it for that. What I don't want to see AI do is replace the human relationship and the human touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
As someone who's had a million of those guidebooks of resources, being able to gather resources quickly is an amazing opportunity, and it's changed our work quite a bit. I'm going to just fall in with everybody else. Our signature strength at our organization is relationships, and we've got to be actively listening, really engaged, and know people individually.
Okay.
I would say all of those things, and then what to do with my backyard.
Hillary, you're always coming out of left field with your responses. It's like, wait, what? Thank you. All right, so we're going to quickly go around, and this will be the last question before we move to audience questions. What's one piece of advice you would give to others for successfully working with colleagues from different generations? So we have some little nuggets that have already come up. Anything that hasn't been shared? Any suggestions?
I think that for us, and I think this is very simple to do in a nonprofit, mission-driven organization, is we communicate in different ways, but we're all, like, as long as we are all aligned on the common thread and the common mission of what we're doing, I can adapt and work with anybody, and I can call them versus text them versus email. We're speaking the same language, and we have the same goals, and I think that's what's most important and most rewarding about working across generations.
Thank you.
And just to jump in, I'd say, I mean, empathy is incredibly important, and thinking about what can you gain from another generation. Sometimes it's easy to get cynical and focus too much on pragmatism, and sometimes I think, like in advocacy work, idealism is really important, and sometimes you lose that, or you say that's not realistic. But you can still use that energy and inform that energy, and it's important to kind of think about ways that you can take and share traits with different generations.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just say intentionality and making those spaces for conversations, particularly since COVID. I think we've embraced a lot of different ways people do their work, but if we don't have time to sit down and have our organizations support us in time just to have conversations and learn from each other and listen, I don't think we're going to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with what I just said a little bit earlier, is to listen for understanding and not for judgment or reaction,
Yes.
to help really build that bridge and that common ground that you can have even when differences present itself.
Okay, thank you. And Wendell, final thoughts.
And I will also echo one of my previous points by adapting to the nuances of the different generations that you do work with, while also identifying the way that you show up inside the workplace. Don't forget that you're a person, right? You're growing, you're learning, and simultaneously we are all growing and learning.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to turn it to you, our audience, for questions that you have for us. We have folks stationed throughout the room. If you're interested in asking a question, please raise your hand. Hillary, you scared folks with your...
I know, so my backyard has this, it like slopes down.
Oh, there's a question up there, okay.
Hi, so my name's Alex Collins. I'm a site manager with SSM DePaul and the clinical engineering healthcare space. We see within our workforce, all the generations. We're coming up on a huge retirement wave of boomers, right? And getting an influx of millennials, Gen Z, even some Gen Alpha for interns that are like still in high school. And one of the things we're balancing is everyone's own like personal bias for what good work is to them. So I have my boomers that really like to be there 9 to 5, and that's really good work to them. And then I have my millennials and Gen Zers that are very KPI driven, I'll say it that way. And once they do their work, why do they have to be at work anymore? They did their job. And when it comes to performance reviews, from a KPI perspective, they hit all the marks. They checked all the boxes. They did good work. But then balancing that out with the boomers' perception of their work of like, well, I didn't see them here on Tuesday. It was like, well, they didn't have any work on Tuesday. And, me as their manager, I balanced that. What you didn't see was that they actually came in Saturday and Sunday and did work too. And just balancing the internal relationships of the workforce of, this is what good work is to you, but that's not necessarily what I expect from my other employees. How do y'all recommend balancing that, both the, inter-workforce relationships and then as a manager yourselves of, level setting everyone's expectations of like, for the boomers, I tell them, like, you need to be more selfish, you need to be more self-centered, have a higher value of self, where it's, you did a lot of work that Friday and it's now noon, take the rest of the day off, like you did good work today. And they're like, no, I need to be here till 5. So, I'm your boss. No, you don't. But that's good work to them, and I don't want to take that away, right? I need that stability in my workforce. But then also, if I'm, working that Gen Zer and they do good work, and I tell them, take off after lunch on Friday, they're like, yeah, I was planning on it. and I need both. But how do I manage those relationships, both internally with them, where I don't get the boomer upset at the Gen Zer because they took off early, but they did good work, but also how do I make sure I'm recognizing everyone for the good work they are doing?
What a great question, and let me tell you how timely it is, because when you look at the literature out there, there's tension points that you're highlighting that are all over the literature, because you're not alone in trying to figure that out. So, to our expert of panelists, thoughts?
I will say, I think finding ways to acknowledge the contributions that people are making and how they're making them is really important, because you can really highlight how some of those differences play together to create some cohesion. I'm a big valuer of graphic visioning of where we're going and how we're getting there, and I think each of those generations is getting there in a little bit different way, and so being able to pinpoint how that looks is helpful for me as a boomer. Yep, you're right. They did this amazing thing.
As a Gen Zer, I've been caught up in that KPI-driven mindset inside my work, but I think it's important to highlight the reason behind why the boomers are that way, why they do sacrifice that time and the power that brings to them as professionals. That's the one thing that pulled me out of being as aggressive inside the workspace about, I did my job, I get to leave, right? And I don't think that it's necessary as an employer to force that culture change on either end, right? Because you're still gonna have the Gen Zers and the boomers are still gonna be there. Finding that middle ground of just explaining both sides a little bit more will probably bring you better results.
I'll just add to finding that source of both sides and pick up there. One of the things that we did with our staff at Girl Scouts is that we did an emergenetics. DeAndre and I are familiar with that from our old stomping grounds, but brought that to our organization just because we saw those personality differences and inability to really communicate with one another when those differences presented with some of our boomers versus millennials and all of that. But we did the emergenetics assessment, and there's so many out there, but it really helped the staff and teams to sit back, and all of the different directors and even my executive leadership team, it gave them an opportunity to sit back and go, oh, she's not difficult. I just didn't approach her the right way because she prefers to be communicated to like this. It was mind-blowing to hear some of the managers and leaders come back and say, I didn't understand why you were wanting us to do this, but now I get her better. And I think it's just that, what you were saying, how do we bridge that gap? And those were some of the assessments and tools that we did just to help them to understand who the individuals were that they were working with, that it may not always be that you're going to be on the same common ground with one another, and you still may walk away agreeing to disagree, but at least you understand the preferences of communication and work style. So that's been very helpful for us.
Yeah, I like that, because I think it's really important that we don't immediately equate those generational differences to value, which I think can easily happen, because you don't work the way that I prefer to work. I question the value of your work. And I think that's where you increase those tension points.
I was just going to say, I think, too, it's just one way to get around that is just to set boundaries. We're all connected, or at least can be in our jobs, which means you're not always seeing maybe all of what people are doing. It's not the same as maybe how it always used to be, where if you weren't in the chair, you weren't working. And some jobs are like that, but a lot are connected. And so I think being clear on those boundaries, so everyone's aware of what everyone's doing, but also so that people aren't getting burnt out and overworked being available all the time.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't think there's any more questions, and I just want to thank all of our panelists today for your time and insight. And next up, we have Dr. Pittman, who's going to close us out.
Thanks, DeAndre. Keeping employees across generations, what a great topic. I hope you enjoyed this event as much as I did. I really appreciate the panelists from both of our sessions. And DeAndre, great job, as always, in leading this. And all of us are around. If any of you have any questions or would like to work with the college, please let us know. We have several team members here. But thank you again for your time, your attention, your participation, and we will see you again here next year for our 19th annual event, Day of the St. Louis Workforce. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.